This is Musket Battles Antietam, the Southern Bridge Strategy. This is part 2 of a series I'm doing where I use the same setup, the same strategy, and illustrate the variability that comes with the chit draw and the combat results. In this video, I'm playing with the labels down. They're facing each player. So that it makes a little more sense, I'm going to be pointing out each corps as it takes a significant action. To begin with, we have Jackson over here, Lee and Stewart, and Longstreet over here on the Confederate right. And here is the player's eye view. When I'm playing solo, I have the labels from both armies facing me. Turn 5, mid-afternoon, AP Hill will be coming on right here. On the Union side, the main drive will be coming down here across the southern bridge. You've got 1st Corps and 9th Corps, Hooker and Burnside, lined up to force the issue. You also have the artillery over here. Sumner's 2nd Corps will be coming across here and supporting this direction. And then demonstrating in front of Jackson will be Porter, Pleasanton with his cavalry, Mansfield's 12th Corps. Starting on turn 3, late morning, Franklin's 6th Corps will be coming up the Burnsboro Turnpike and joining the fray. Now, one thing that's different with me replaying the same strategy every time is that between two players, if you did this, they start figuring out how to, if the Union always came across down here, eventually the Confederate player would come up with a plan to adapt and conform to that. Now, in any war game you play, you get to run through this scenario as many times as you wish, whereas the historical commanders only had one shot. But if you have a regular opponent, as many of us do, you also get to the point where you know the enemy commander and can start guessing and second-guessing the actions they might take. That can have an authentic feeling, just like historical commanders knew their opponents. Enough jibber-jabber, let's roll. Pleasanton's cavalry moves forward. One thing you'll notice, and this happens for everybody, is once you've played a few times, you pretty much know how far a unit can move. And also units are rarely moving as far as they can. They advance from a position to another position. This means you're not carefully measuring each time, which would be very time consuming. The game can play pretty quickly. Next is Longstreet, who's holding his position. Next is Mansfield's 12th Corps, who advances to the West Woods. Porter's 5th Corps stays out of field of fire, but nevertheless advances. Over here, the detachment falls back, and Jackson's artillery opens up on Mansfield's corps. Mansfield's corps has cover. Nevertheless, the Green troops fall back. Next, the Union artillery moves up. They occupy the hill here, this hill here, and finally that hill right there. Next is Sumner's 2nd Corps. The Lee elements make it to the sunken road as the rest of his corps filters across. And that's it for the early hours of day 1. With a more classical drive down from the north, you get a lot of combat on turn 1, or you can. But turn 1, I'm just getting my artillery into position. Turn 2, first action is Jackson's artillery fires on Union troops in the sunken road. Now, the sunken road doesn't offer protection from this artillery unit because it's on a hill. They are reduced to spent. Now, you'll note when you're spent, you don't flip labels up like you used to do. Now you flip lengthwise so the label's upside down. The opponent still doesn't know. All he knows is he did 2 hits, and that merely caused this block to flip to spent, which means it must be elite. Now, not much has happened this morning because the last chit to be drawn was the Union artillery, and nothing happens until the artillery is set up and ready to fire. It does 1 hit, and they are flipped. They are driven back. No effect. Now we're wondering, will Longstreet be able to shore up his defenses, or will the Union troops come flooding across? Late morning, the artillery is drawn first. Now, the only target this block can see is Jackson's artillery on the hill here. These woods here prevent them from seeing at the lower levels these units, and this hill here prevents them from seeing anything back here. But these guys on the hill, they can see. Long-range accurate fire drives them off the hill. Jackson sends them back forward, reorganizes them, but they're still spent, so they cannot bombard. At this point, Jackson's not willing to unpack bags. It's too soon. Or should he? You need to unpack them right here. YOLO. He unpacks them. Now this turn the artillery moves, so they can't rally them yet. Next turn they can rally. So you know what? He'll wait till next turn to unpack bags. No sense doing it sooner than you need to. Stewart has Fitz Lee move forward. Longstreet is drawn. He reoccupies the hill and reorganizes some of his rearward defenses. Burnside moves his corps closer. Sumner's troops gain the hilltop. Not wishing to delay any longer, Hooker crosses the southern bridge. Late morning combat at the southern bridge. Because they crossed the bridge for the first round of combat, Union troops count as flanked. Heavy casualties. Both blocks are lost. But Hooker has gained a foothold across the Antietam. And I almost forgot, on turn 3, it goes so quickly I didn't realize it was already time, Franklin's 6th Corps arrives. Now they're in column, and they can move 2 infantry moves up the road. But that puts them into the field of fire of the enemy, and they can't come within a third, this is a third of a foot move, of an enemy unit when in column. So that is how they look. Now we go to turn 4, which is midday. Now with Hooker across the bridge, who moves next? The Chitral becomes very critical. Were I playing a human opponent, we'd be rolling furiously trying to alter the turn order. But when playing solo, I take the Chitral as it comes. I'm not trying to win, I'm trying to see what happens. How does this play out? First round is 9th Corps. 9th Corps comes surging across. Now you see 2 flank attacks here, but Longstreet hasn't moved yet. Now Jackson moves next, and he sends D.H. Hill towards Sharpsburg in case the situation gets critical in front of Longstreet. So far the Union is pretty quiet on his front. The artillery on the hill opens up, driving the defenders back. This artillery crosses the bridge. Franklin moves forward. Stewart's cavalry flanks the Union. Hooker keeps up the pressure. Hooker and Burnside have a confab at the southern bridge. And now Longstreet reacts. He's got to hold here. He unpacks bags. Now one thing on this map, it looks like the map's cut off unnaturally right here. But the Potomac is flowing just off the map, and all the bridges are blown. There's nowhere to go this way off the map. The South's only path of retreat is off this bridge here and this road here. Last move is Sumner. He sends Sedgwick forward to relieve the pressure on Franklin's attack. That's the wild maneuvering in midday. There's one combat. Here you have a full-strength unit attacking Evans' brigade. It's a detachment, but they are flanked. This attack is resolved after this attack. Union does 2 hits on Evans. These are Union casualties, Confederate casualties, and off to either side I put detachments because they don't count towards breaking the army. Now Evans did manage to inflict a hit which drives Smith back. Now Sedgwick's attack on the cavalry ordinarily can ride off, but they can't because they were involved in combat. They both do 1, and now the cavalry rides off. And now we go to turn 5 mid-afternoon. Mid-afternoon, Hooker is drawn first. One thing to understand about the Chitral is it's simulating simultaneous movement. So oftentimes, moving after an opponent is much better because then you get to see what he's doing and can react to it. It's kind of a way of saying you anticipated the enemy's move. Sometimes you do want to move first. It's not always a case of first being better or last being better. It depends. Each Chitral, you look at it and say, what can I do given the fact that I know what these units are doing and I don't know what these units are doing? So Hooker drives like that, moves the rest of his corps across the bridge. Up here, the North is still holding. Some of the artillery moves forward. Jackson sends D.H. Hill into the Union Army. Franklin sends his troops forward, which includes Smith's division, which is spent as they race through and occupy Sharpsburg. Hooker's corps charges forward. Fitz Lee is in cover, not affected by the line of fire from Sedgwick's men, who are deep into Sharpsburg, and he recovers. In an attempt to discomfit the enemy, Sumner charges straight forward, and now Longstreet has some thinning to do. Thanks to the unpacked bags, D. Jones recovers, and he pulls Walker's troops back, and he places Hood's Texans behind the baggage train. And perhaps most importantly, A.P. Hill comes on. Mid-afternoon combat. Sumner's men charging the Confederates on the hill. This is basically artillery guarded by detachment. Neither side gets a hit, and the Southern troops fall back. This is D.H. Hill's drive in the center. Sumner's troops are driven back. And finally we have Burnside's drive. McLaw's division is driven back, with heavy losses on both sides, and in fact, Burnside's men are completely exhausted, spent, and off the map. And now it's turn 6, late afternoon. The South is holding along a sliver here. Casualties are almost even. It's still anyone's battle, but nighttime is coming. It's turn 6. McClellan is done demonstrating on the northern flank. He releases the dogs of war. Mansfield's troops charge the West Woods. Jackson throws D.H. Hill against Sumner's men. He repositions his own best troops, including Stark's brigade, further south. Hearing of cavalry in the center around Sharpsburg, Pleasanton positions his cavalry south, while leaving some screening detachments. Sumner surges forward. Union artillery opens up on the southern troops they see. To no effect. They bring the artillery across Myers Ford. More artillery is brought across the Lower Bridge Road. Burnside organizes as best he can what's left of his Ninth Corps, but at this point losses have rendered them ineffective, which means they can no longer rally. Franklin organizes his troops in Sharpsburg and sends them west into the Confederate Army. Longstreet's troops recover and he dresses his line. Just in time as Hooker's corps slams into the line, driving for the bags. Anticipating the need, he unpacks bags. Porter, the Lion of Antietam, charges the extreme left flank of Lee's line. Anchored against the woods here, they're free from flanking efforts of Stuart's cavalry. But Hampton is ready. Come on, boys. A little more forward. Fitz-Lee attacks the disorganized Union troops outside of Sharpsburg. And now on turn 6, we finally find Antietam turning into the knockdown, drag-out slugfest it was historically. Porter's drive on the lone detachment in the extreme left of Lee's line. With one hit, they throw back Morrell's Green Division, and then they fall back. Mansfield's drive in the West Woods. They drive into skirmishers, and then Ewell's men fall back. Now D.H. Hill has himself in a tight spot. He's outflanked, but he's on a hill. He has a 2 dice, the weak die. Ordinarily, Union being the flanker would have the 4 die, the hot die. But because they're on a hill, it's only a white die. So a weak die and a regular die. They do 1. There's only 1 attack. These are the bags. They didn't want to bring the bags can attack. Meant it to be French's Green Division. But D.H. Hill loses a block. The rest of his men retreat. They're flanked. There's no reason to stay and fight with those odds. Fitz-Lee's dragoons on the confused Union troops. They do 1, which drives them back. They push ahead the other block, and they suffer 2 hits. 1, their elite status absorbs, and the second flips them to spent. Now dragoons automatically recover from spent if they don't move. Now what kind of attack was Franklin able to put together here? They're attacking Walker's division with Burnside's artillery reserve. They both use the 3 dice, but the artillery is considered to fire first. The grape drives the spent troops back, but that does 2 hits on the artillery. They fall back. This is desperate. Now we've got an even odds fight. Fresh units. Slocum's division manages to drive back the southern troops. And now in front of the bags, we got Hooker's best troops, but they are attacking up a hill. Jones' division takes a hit but holds. The lead elements were disordered and driven out of place. Now you have Hood's Texans facing Doubleday's elite division, elite on elite. You never really want to waste your elites attacking elites, but who knew it was going to fall out this way? Hooker calls off the attack. They were getting the worst to the end of the contest. The writing was on the wall. Now it's turn 7, early evening. Burnside renews the attack. I was wrong. I said Ninth Corps was exhausted, and that's with 50% losses, but I forget they now have 5 blocks. They've lost 2 blocks, so they're still able to recover. Pleasanton's cavalry charges Fitz-Lee's cavalry. They're elite, but they're spent. Union artillery is positioned on the hill. They can start firing into the rear of the Confederate troops. Hooker's corps redoubles its attack. Doubleday's elite division recovers with the bags there. Sumner's troops charge forward. He unpacks bags. His thankful men recover. Stuart's cavalry falls back and reforms. Now here, there's less than half a block width, so they can't. Slocum's corps is next, and these guys would like to move here and contact the bags and end the battle, win the game.
but they can't fit through there, so they have to attack. Now it's Longstreet's option. What's he going to do? He could move his artillery here and protect the bags. But if Hood has to retreat, he'll push it all. He won't push the bags back, but he'll push the artillery back if he ends up retreating. This is a tough decision. If the bags get captured, the day is lost, and Jackson's entire corps is lost. That could be ending the war. A prudent Longstreet player would probably pack up his bags and leave now. This would mean a Southern withdrawal, a historical result. But you know what? It's just a game. I'm gonna gamble. He throws a spent Confederate division, the division of Jones, into the fight. And now Sykes drives on Jackson, all part of Porter's 5th Corps, the line of Antietam. What does Lee do? What Lee would like to do is send White's cavalry into the flank. But Hampton's on the way, and he's already moved. He's going to pull back the artillery into detachment, support D.H. Hill on the hill with his own division. He begins his withdrawal. And Mansfield sends his division against elements of Ewell's division. Here it is, early evening, and we've got combat. Mansfield on Ewell. Ewell's men are driven back. Sumner attacking Jackson. Just noting at this point, losses are roughly equal, 4 blocks each. The attack peters out and Jackson's men stand. Franklin's drive. A Southern loss. Hooker's drive. Now they had to go up a hill to get there. They're at a disadvantage. Not surprisingly, Hooker's green troops were no use and no match for Hood's Texans. Burnside's drive on McLaw's division. Not a good start for Burnside's troops. In this attack, which is really green troops against A.P. Hill, it was just kind of a screening attack. And they're lost. And now it's turn 8. At this point, I believe the drive on the bags has failed. There's just one turn left, and that's not really enough time to recover. The North needs a turn to just rally their troops. 4 more casualties will break the army, so desperate attacks are not a wise move. So in the last turn, the North, who can only take 4 losses, does not want to attack because all their troops are spent. Likewise, the South is exhausted, their troops are spent. So if we end the game here, there's 2 ways to end the game. One, you can go into a second day. And I'd be very interested to hear what you think might happen if a second day were fought. The other thing, I'm going to go with the Musket Battles rules as presented. Now, I would just call this a draw at this point. And you could retire to a local public house and talk about what you think would really have happened. Or the outcome of this really would have been. What would that mean? But say you're at a tournament and you need to know who won. Well, I've added them up, and the South has 17 points that it has lost. The North has lost 18 points. So it's very close, 17 to 18. Putting the South with a slight edge. Now then it wants to know, how did the enemy withdraw? In the night? Voluntarily during the day? Because they were broken? Because they were routed? Now this ends basically very close, almost as a draw. If the Union pushed and broke and became routed, now they get their points are multiplied times 4. That would be a major Southern victory. If they break, in other words, if their bags are captured, it's times 3. Pretty major victory. If they retreat voluntarily during the day, they did not retreat. They just stopped attacking. Which means they're not going to retreat, but the South could retreat voluntarily during the night, and the multiple is just 1. It's just whatever the score was. The South did more points of damage to the North. So if the South retreats now, they win by a point. If you were in a tournament, that's what you would do as the South. There we go. 17-18 Confederate victory. And they withdraw in the night, as they did historically. Good game. Okay, gang, I messed up. Those are green blocks for the Union. So the North actually won by 4 points. And to the point of fighting the battle with the same strategy, the same starting positions, I felt this battle fought very differently than the last one. Even though it was similar in the sense that the North got across, and we're all held up, everything was held up around here, both sides fought to total exhaustion. Turn by turn, every step was interesting. It was interesting to see how this would play out. And again, I asked, what do you think?